usually Monday, but weekly press conference in which, as usual, we are going to talk about two main topics. The first topic, as always, has to do with data-specific activity around gun violence in the prior week. And the second topic today has to do with a successful prosecution of a shocking murder. And we are honored and delighted to have the mother of the victim, Eric Fuller, here with us today, Ms. Yvette Fuller, who will be speaking. But let me first start by acknowledging some of the people who are here. We have with us the supervisor of the Homicide Non-Fatal Shooting Unit. We have ADA Helen Park, who once again has had a very successful prosecution of a challenging case in the case of the killing of Mr. Eric Fuller. We have Reverend Myra Maxwell, who is the Executive Director of the DAO's Victim Support Services Division, and who supervises and works alongside Melanie Nelson, the Director of the DAO's Crisis Assistance Response and Engagement for Survivors Unit. ADA Deborah Watson-Stokes, Senior Advisor for Professional Development and Special Projects, is here, and very soon we will have with us the Reverend Clarence Wright, Senior Pastor at Love Zion Baptist Church. So turning to some of the data, the information that we have relating to gun violence over the last week, and I want to be careful that I identify time periods because while some of the news is going in a better direction, some of the news yesterday most certainly was not. But as of December the 5th at 11:59 p.m., we were at 478 homicides year to date. Last year on the same day, there were 500. This is a decrease of 8%. It is a decrease of 43. Obviously, every single one of those 43 lives is of great importance to all of Philadelphia. But we are very, very far from being able to say that the news is good because the level of gun violence remains intolerable, even though it appears that at some point it peaked, and even though it appears at this point that it's going in a better direction, it's going back down. A time period that, not surprisingly, seems to coincide with the pandemic reducing and also with people fully being back to school, especially high schools, and with the activities that have traditionally been available around high school, organized sports, even outside of school, things of that nature becoming available. So we have, knock wood, some cause to be hopeful, despite the fact we remain in a terrible, truly terrible gun violence crisis. The number of homicides in the period 11/25/22 through 12/1/22, which is how we receive this data, was 3. And there were 22 non-fatal shootings. The general average during the pandemic period has been about 1.5 homicides per day, or about 10.5 homicides per week. So 3 homicides is clearly less than that. During the period 11/25 through 12/1, there were 123 gun-related incidents. So that includes crimes committed with guns, such as robbery or aggravated assault, but it also just includes possession of a gun. Of the 123 gun-related incidents, there were 74 arrests made by law enforcement. Among them, in other words, what this office got, the 74 that we got, we brought 73 cases so far. The median bail set for illegal possession of guns was $250,000, despite the fact that we overwhelmingly request about $1 million. And the median bail set for violent offenses with guns was $150,000 on my data, despite the fact that we almost always ask for $1 million or more on these cases. Cash bail continues to fail us. As for shooting incidents, and other related criminal activity, I want to talk specifically about 3 of them before we move on to our second topic. The first one is a non-fatal shooting incident which occurred on Monday, December the 5th, in the 3500 block of K Street in the 24th Police District at about 3:20 in the afternoon. 3 victims were shot. All 3 were taken to Temple Hospital. Victim 1, a 19-year-old black male, was shot once in the back. Victim 2, an 18-year-old black male, was shot once in the back. Victim 3, a 15-year-old black male, shot in the face, left side, and left arm. This investigation remains ongoing. Anyone with information should contact the Shooting Investigation Group of the Philadelphia Police Department. That is 215-686-8270. The only known offender in this incident is 18-year-old Kelvin Cruz, Jr. This investigation is ongoing, and we are looking for more information to make sure that people are held accountable and that they are the right people. Second incident was a double homicide shooting incident that occurred also on Monday, the 5th of December, in the 2200 block of 20th Street. That's the 22nd Police District at about 9:22 p.m. 2 victims were shot. First one is a 31-year-old black male. He was shot multiple times. He was taken to Temple where he was pronounced. Second, a black male, currently known as John Doe, was shot once in the face, and he was pronounced by medics at the scene. This investigation remains ongoing. Anyone with information should contact the PPD Homicide Unit at 215-686-3334. The third incident is a home invasion incident that occurred on Tuesday, December the 6th in the 3200 block of St. Vincent's Street in the 15th Police District at about 2:43 a.m. The only good news is there were no actual injuries. However, at 2:43 a.m., 4 males entered the home through the back door. At least one male was armed with a gun, tied up the complainant. There were no injuries. Money and a phone were taken. No arrest has been made by PPD, and this investigation is ongoing. Anyone with information should contact a different number than the others. Contact the PPD's Northeast Detectives Division at 215-686-3154. It is now my pleasure to introduce Melanie Nelson to give a weekly report on behalf of the DAO's Victim Support Services Division and all the absolutely wonderful work her team does every day. She will explain what efforts were made this week in ways that preserve the confidentiality and the privacy of victims and survivors to make sure that there was proper and deep care through the CARES program.
Thank you, DA Krasner. Good morning. The CARES unit served 4 families this week, providing 13 services to all of those families. Everything we do is confidential. Unfortunately, homicides are taking place everywhere in the city of Philadelphia. For those store owners, if a homicide occurs in your establishment, understand that you are a co-homicide survivor as well. You can always reach out to us. We will provide free services to you and to your staff. It is very unfortunate if something happens in your establishment. We want to be able to love on you as well. You can contact the CARES hotline at 215-275-7937. Again, 215-275-7937. Everything that we do is confidential. Everything that we do is out of love and respect for all of those who were a co-homicide survivor. Peace and love.
It's now time to turn to the second topic that we have for today. I'm not going to steal anybody's thunder here. This case is heartbreaking. It is compelling. It's painful to even hear. And I'm not going to steal the thunder of those who will speak about it shortly, but I do want to make sure we recognize Detective John Maha, who did an amazing job with this investigation. Detective Torsten Lucky, who is in many ways the video detective of the Philadelphia Police Department, who always does an amazing job. This is, in fact, a case that involved the use of video and some really creative detective work. It's also a case where forensics proved their value. They will always prove their value, but this is a concrete example of a case where forensics proved their value. ADA Park will give you an overview of the investigation, the prosecution, conviction, and the sentencing of the defendant in this matter, Nasir Watson. And she will also have the honor of introducing the mother of Mr. Fuller, Yvette Fuller, who has been kind enough to come here and say a few words. ADA Park.
Thank you, DA Krasner. The facts of this case are of a particularly violent nature. The incident occurred on May 4th of 2021. 25-year-old Eric Fuller was murdered by being shot 19 times, all about his upper body. And this occurred in front of his 7-month-old daughter and his child's mother. The incident occurred at 23rd and Lehigh Avenue in the Strawberry Mansion section of our city. Last week, as the DA stated, a jury convicted Nasir Watson of first-degree murder, violation of the Uniform Firearms Act 6106, possessing an instrument of crime, and recklessly endangering another person, namely the 7-month-old daughter of Eric Fuller. The evidence in this case was collected thanks to the meticulous work of the assigned investigator, Detective John Maha, and the review of Detective Lucky, who the DA previously mentioned. There was also extremely thorough documentation by the medical examiner, the preservation and the documentation of the crime scene officers, the scientific analyses of individuals from the Office of Forensic Science, and all of that collectively gave us the necessary evidentiary certainty to know that we arrested, tried, and convicted the right person. The facts of this case and the evidence rested primarily on surveillance footage, which captured Nasir Watson completely dressed in black and concealed, following, in fact, stalking Eric Fuller while he walked down, completely oblivious to what was about to happen, with his 7-month-old daughter in his hands and the mother of his child walking by his side. The footage captures Watson following Eric Fuller down the street, down 23rd Street specifically, and then proceeding to shoot him 19 times, possibly more given the strike mark evidence on the sidewalk. The daughter, 7-month-old daughter, is seen on camera lying face down on the sidewalk just steps away. And there were fired cartridge casings found all over the scene, including inside the child's stroller. As I stated earlier, the level of violence and the brutality of this crime is alarming, to say the very least. The video surveillance captured Nasir Watson then returning to a black vehicle from which he had exited. The driver of this vehicle was unfortunately never identified and has not yet been prosecuted for this crime. The entire crime, so the black vehicle pulling over, Watson exiting the vehicle, following Eric Fuller, killing him, returning to his vehicle, and fleeing down Lehigh Avenue, took less than 5 minutes. But for, as I stated before, the accurate and tireless work of all of the investigators in this case and the compilation of all of that evidence, I would not be standing here today with a successful conviction. So I would like to thank everybody from the police department. I'd like to thank specifically my supervisor and colleagues in the office who provided the insight and the guidance that I needed. I would like to thank specifically the jurors who listened to this case. They assessed all of the evidence. They rendered a just verdict. When the defendant was being sentenced to life without parole, he uttered threats against the jury, and that is being taken very seriously. We are looking into potential charges against Mr. Watson for threatening the safety and security of our jurors. We take that extremely seriously, and that will be pursued as well. Finally, I'd like to thank the family of Eric Fuller, specifically his mother, but also his sister and other family members, his aunt, who were present for the trial, who patiently and sincerely and respectfully waited for justice to be done. And they were so brave in sitting through and watching the horrific events of that day, watching the horrific things that were done to their loved one. I'd like to thank them, and at this time I'd like to introduce Ms. Yvette Fuller to come and speak.
Thank you so much, 88 Park. My son, Eric Fuller, I had just spoken with him earlier that day. My birthday was 4 days after his murder, and we were all planning a big celebration. You know, you never know when is the last time you're going to speak to a loved one. And as always, we ended our call with, "I love you." Little did I know that that would be the last time that I would hear my child's voice. He is my only son. He's from a family of very strong, educated women who are God-fearing, and it's that faith that has brought us through this terrible ordeal. He survived by his sister. I only had the two children, a boy and a girl. And his loss is always felt. His niece, who he was very close to, we're a very small but close-knit family, was in St. Martin de Porres School. Her second grade classroom, the windows faced the street where Eric was executed. Her and her classmates heard the whole ordeal, seen the cops, but she did not know it was her beloved E, as she called him. My family has been through so much, like so many families throughout the city who have lost loved ones through senseless murder and crime. Eric's love for his daughter, his last act was to save her life. She was but 7 months old at the time, and he threw her so that in hopes that she would not be harmed. He always stated that she would never have a boyfriend, like most fathers feel, and that he was going to go with her on her prom. And we were like, okay, well, we'll keep working on that. That's not going to happen. And she loved him too. They were always together. If he was holding her, no one, not even her mother, could take him out of her arms. It was a love that was cut too short. Throughout this whole ordeal, the family, my family, could never have gone through it without the support of so many others around this city. I know in the news throughout the country, you hear different information about things that, don't go so well. But I'm here to give my thank you to the DA's office. 88 Parks was absolutely phenomenal and kept us engaged and kept us informed about every step of the way what to expect. I want to thank Nicole Hall from the Victim Services Unit, who stayed with us, who contacted us, who comforted us, who protected us. She was absolutely a godsend. Detective Maha and Lucky were absolutely phenomenal. Detective Maha, from the very beginning, from the time I met him, supported my family, and we're just so grateful, as well as the first responders, the jury. And I also want to give a very special thank you to the neighbors on the 2600 block of 23rd Street, who on that fateful day responded. So many times they could have stayed inside. They didn't have to act at all, but they were there, and they helped my child as best they could. My family, we thank you for all your efforts. Our family and friends who prayed with us, prayed for us, wrapped their love around us, we thank them. And I also want to give, most importantly, a message to the community at large. We got to stop this violence. Life is not a video game. People are dying, and it's unfair, and it's not right, and it's unjustified. You cannot expect to take the life of another and not have your own life felt by that. Nasir's Watson's mother, from mother to mother, we never, when our children were born, never expected this would be the outcome. There's more ways to die than to totally disappear. Her 22-year-old son, because of his acts, will never be there to support their family. And I know from mother to mother, her heart too is broken. And so I ask young people, please think before you act. Think about the consequences of your actions. It's so easy just to react and rush and do something. But you not only hurt that victim's family, you hurt your loved ones too. So please, again, think before you act and stop this violence. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Reverend Wright.
Good morning, everyone. There's really not much to say following that. Hearing from the mother, I think every eye in this room should be welled with tears at what you have experienced. So no, we stand with you, we pray with you. I'm here because I'm the pastor of the Love Zion Baptist Church. This tragic murder happened on the 2600 block of 23rd Street. My church is on the 2500 block of North 23rd Street. I have members who live on the block. I have children in my church who attend St. Martin de Porres. It is very close to home. Unfortunately, throughout the years of pastoring in that community, I've been close to more than a few murders and other instances of violence like this. But I have to say that this one in particular is heart-wrenching because of the details. To the family, to the Fuller family, know that the Love Zion Church and all of the community of churches and institutions of faith in North Philadelphia, we stand with you in this season and in this hour. And I want to thank all of our institutions, the DA's office, our police investigators, all of the ADAs who worked on the case. You know, there's an African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child, but it's more than just raising a child. These children grow up, and we have a society that needs to run and needs to function. There are issues that have prevented our city from functioning. This should not be normal, and I refuse to ever accept this as normal. But in order to restore normalcy, we need to close these cases as this DA has done. We need to close these cases. If you can get away with murder over and over again, there's no reason to stop the cycle. But this one case where there is an example of justice being served, it is our prayer that it can serve as an example for some others, so that another young man or young woman might be in a position to make a life or death decision, and they may make the right decision because they'll remember this case. So thank you to the district attorney and all of your staff. Thank you to the police department of Philadelphia and everyone involved in this case. Let's continue to pray that this violence will cease.
All right, just a couple more comments. Thank you above all for Yvette Fuller and her comments. From the prosecutor's perspective, certain things jump out. I think you've already heard them, mostly, but there are a few details I think are worth hearing. So the way this case was put together by PPD was a combination of extraordinary investigation and extraordinary forensics. Detective Maha and Torsten Lucky knew how to think about this case, and so they were able to do some really good stuff with a case that was difficult. Yes, there was video, but it was video of a person who was masked, of a person who was dressed in black. The video wasn't going to cut it. It was not going to be enough. There was a license plate, and the license plate was attached to a car, and through good investigation, the owner of the car, who is not the defendant was found, questions were asked, additional steps were taken. Those steps involved, among other things, obtaining additional video. And the additional video was of Nasir Watson a day after the killing in a grocery store. He's in the grocery store, walking around. He's wearing a number of identical articles of clothing, and they're clearly visible. By the time the car is obtained, no matching clothing is in the car. And as is often the case, the actual killer has taken steps to hide his identity. So the detectives went a step further. DNA was taken from the car. The owner of the car turned out to be a relative of the defendant. But that doesn't do it for you. DNA was taken from the car. Some DNA that was obtained in the car did match the defendant. And perhaps most importantly, there was a different jacket in the trunk of the car, but that different jacket had a tiny amount of gunshot residue. Gunshot residue is the burnt gunpowder and other chemicals involved in the firing of a bullet that blow back onto the person who shoots the gun. So the combination of being able to establish similarity of clothing, or actually identical clothing in our opinion, but what was visibly similar clothing a day later, DNA in the car, a family connection to the car, this evasive effort to hide the clothing by having another jacket back there, which failed because a tiny amount of the gunshot residue transferred. All of that taken together took a case that very well could have been a not guilty based upon the video and turned it into a guilty within a matter of hours. Obviously, the prosecutor did a fabulous job, but so did the PPD in putting this one together. And it is a confirmation not only of really good detective work and really good prosecution, but the incredible value of thinking the right way and having the forensics that can turn a corner. I raise this because, in general, there will be good news coming as to forensics in the city of Philadelphia, and it will be coming pretty soon. The other couple things that stand out, obviously the heroism of the father. Here is Mr. Fuller is being assassinated, essentially, and was assassinated as he lay on the pavement. Many shots were fired into him, and his last act is not to run and abandon his child. It is to push his child farther away. And then I guess part 3 is just the comments of Yvette Fuller, which were amazing. Okay, let's start with, in numerical order, Channel 3. Are there any questions? No. Channel 6? No. Channel 29?
So you talk about the discrepancy in bails pretty regularly.
Right.
What is causing that discrepancy? You seem to go for these $1 million bails and you get significantly lower ones. What needs to change in your eyes in that?
The real solution, the best solution, would be for Pennsylvania to pass laws that would eliminate the use of cash, that would divorce cash from the process of deciding who should sit in jail until trial and who should not. A no cash bail system currently exists in the District of Columbia. It's been there over 30 years. It's been quite successful. Jersey is pretty close to one, meaning it has most of those features. Kentucky has it. Illinois just passed it. This is the modern trend. And what it means is that if you are a rich, hardcore criminal, you ain't getting out. And if you are a poor person who is accused of your second retail theft, you are getting out, which is how it should be. The actual experience in the District of Columbia has been that about 12% of people sit through trial, and the other 88% are not going to sit in jail at great public expense just because they're broke. We have to take people and keep them in jail because of danger. It's what we have to do, not because of their economics. And that's not the system we have. What is working at the micro level in Philadelphia is that we have an old system. And there's a little matrix somewhere that somebody wrote up a long time ago which suggests certain amounts of bail to bail commissioners. Sadly, we don't set bail. The DA's office does not set it, neither does the defense. It is set by bail commissioners initially, and then it is set by judges later. And the real issue here is that we have bail commissioners who are not accepting of change. They are very comfortable with numbers they were giving a long time ago, and those numbers are ineffective. Various things have changed over time. One thing that has changed is inflation. Another thing that has changed is we have a lot more bail bonds people. You perhaps have heard of Dog the Bounty Hunter. Well, these are people you pay. They pay your bail, which is bigger than what you pay them, and then they're going to go find you, in theory, if you run. Well, what it really means is instead of paying 10% of the bail that comes out of the mouth of the bail commissioner, you're only paying 3.3%. So you could have, let's just look at $150,000. That was the average, that was the median bail for violent gun offense. That actually means you have to pay 15 to the city, or if you don't want to do that, you go to a bail bonds person and pay 5. For $5,000, you can get out for shooting or shooting at somebody else. It's not enough. I would like to see a system where if you shoot at somebody else, you better have some pretty good reasons why you're not just going to sit until trial, especially in the middle of a gun violence crisis. And that's why time and time again, we come up with a much bigger number, because we don't have the ability to ask for people to be held without bail unless it's a homicide. The law doesn't let us do that. So we ask for a very high number, and we don't get it. This is less than 1/6 of the money we're asking for. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think it's very, very frustrating. There's a couple other details and wrinkles to this, including the fact that the municipal court in 2019 passed a rule that for every single bail, all you got to pay is 10%. That's not how it used to be. 10 years ago, now and then you'd see a judge say, well, this will be $150,000, but you can't pay 10%. You got to pay the whole thing, right? At least they had the ability to do that. And then the municipal court took that away. I'm not saying they're bad for doing it, but it's a bad outcome that we have people who do such dangerous things and they can pay their bail. So that is, frankly, where the problem lies. It is a sad truth that many of our legislators are familiar with lobbyists from the industry, the private bail industry, meaning bail bonds people. It is a sad truth that many of our legislature like the fact that cash bail is collected by counties, because they find ways to put that cash bail to use in their counties. But we cannot pay off safety. We cannot accept the payoff instead of having a bail system that actually keeps people safe on the one hand and make sure that poor people don't just sit in jail for something dumb because they're broke. All right, let me see. 3629 we did. Philadelphia Inquirer. Yes, sir.
So it was mentioned earlier that their driver is not arrested or apprehended. Are there any beats or any sort of developments in that aspect of the investigation?
Please give me a moment to check with a couple people, and we'll see if we're able to answer that. Thank you for the question. For reasons of, investigative integrity, I cannot answer that question at this time.
My second question was, you mentioned towards the tail end of the discussion, there's good news coming on forensics. Is there anything you can tell us about the nature of that or even timeline as far as that news goes?
Well, what I know is already public is that the city of Philadelphia, after years of our advocating it and gaining support from various council people, went to a position of increasing the city's funding of PPD forensics to $5 million. They have historically been pretty flat, or most recently there was talk about $500,000. Well, $500,000 is really only 1% of what was needed to get the $50 million state-of-the-art crime lab we need. So that part of it, I think, has already been public, but there is more good news coming, and coming soon, in relation to state funding. I don't want to steal thunder from the PPD, but I am very, very hopeful that something that we have been advocating and talking about now for years, is going to come to fruition, and we're really going to be in a position where PPD has the tools they need in the toolbox that will make it easier for them to solve more cases. Are there any other questions?
Question about 8% decrease in murders.
Yes.
Is there anything that you can attribute that to? Is it the holiday that disrupted the week? Is there something that skews those numbers? It's a pretty decent sized drop.
So, you know, the interesting thing about this data is it's always a comparison of this date to this date last year. So most of the seasonal effects, we all know that warm weather, it correlates with higher levels of crime. Even things like holidays, things of that sort are kind of taken into account. They're sort of controlled, maybe not exactly, but roughly controlled by comparing this date this year to this date last year. So I don't think those are the main factors. I do think it is very clear that as we've seen the pandemic start to wane, I wouldn't say it's over, and obviously we have some things going on with flus and other endemic diseases. I wouldn't say it's over, but as we see society coming back to normal, as you see businesses open and you see the adding of jobs, as we are seeing, in my mind, most importantly, public schools fully open, all of their extracurricular activities fully open, organized sports returning fully. As we're seeing all of these things come back to normal, we have also seen this historically high increase, which went over 2 years, crest and start to fall. And the cresting, at least in Philadelphia, pretty closely correlates with September. So I think there's no question that is a factor. Now, it's also true that during the pandemic, there was an astronomical purchase of guns that occurred, million guns in 1 year. You flood the streets with guns, thank you, NRA, and there may be consequences. And I would suggest to you that we're not seeing an astronomical gun buy right now for a variety of reasons, without getting into it too deeply. But, you know, in my mind, it has been predicted from the beginning. It's hard to know causation for sure. But in my opinion, there is no question that a part of this has been the reduction in the pandemic, and that I am hopeful that we have seen this phenomenon crest and that we are going in a better direction. Certainly the national data is consistent with the Philadelphia data, that there has been a cresting and a slight decrease happening now for a number of months. Are there any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, and thank you again to Yvette Fuller for your amazing words.